Hey guys, welcome back. Today, I'll be explaining hip swivels, one of my favorite movements for opening up the hips. Why hip swivels? I used to always address forward and back hip flexor type stretching, side to side middle split type of stretching, and I got stuck. It wasn't until I worked rotation within the hip joint capsule itself that then my hips really were rewarded with a greater sense of freedom, and I felt like I could move a lot more freely within them. When I went back to the other type of stretching I was doing before, my range of movement again increased because I had worked rotation within the capsule joint itself and then moved back to those movements. So that's why I always try to say, find a way to work rotation first, and then you can move on to the other type of movements. So, what are hip swivels? That's what I'll be explaining today. All you need is a bit of floor space and yourself, and I'll show you some ideas on how to regress, progress, and keep on going. Let's go. To start, all you're going to need is a bit of floor space and yourself. Sit back with your hands behind you and spread your legs like shown. Then you're going to try to pivot on your ankles through your hips from side to side. Try to challenge yourself. Try to open up your hips as much as possible, and when you swivel, try to drive your knees down as much as possible down to the ground. One repetition is going from left to right and then returning back to the starting position. Now watch out, you want to be pivoting through your hips and reducing as much as possible movement through the spine. Try to keep your chest and your belly forward as much as possible, and if you find this twisting a lot, reduce the range of the rep. We want to try to swivel through our hips only, so it's okay to not be able to touch your knees to the ground. As you practice this movement, you'll find your hips opening up more and more, and you'll be able to get a better range of movement. Once you can do the starting progression and drive your knees to the ground, let's take it to the squat. Get into a resting squat position and put your hands in front of you to support your weight. Then pivoting on one foot, you're going to try and push that hip out and then bring that hip in. Try to touch your knee to the ground. Remember, at first it's always difficult, so use support by putting your hands in front of you. A common mistake is not to keep your feet planted. Be aware if your other foot rises as you try to pivot on your hip. When you start, you might not be able to reach your knee all the way down to the ground. That's fine, just go down to where you can challenge yourself. Once you start feeling strong in this position, you can challenge yourself even further by reducing the weight on your hands until you don't use your hands at all. The next progression starts from a position called the 90-90. Twisting to the side, put one leg in front of you and one leg behind you like shown, so that they both form 90-degree angles. Then, whilst trying to drive your front knee into the ground, you are going to try to raise your rear leg like shown, pivoting from your knee. If this position is too hard, you can make it easier by leaning away from you like shown. This works internal rotation on the rear leg. You should feel the muscles on the top of the hip really working. For each rep, try and raise your leg as high as possible. You can also try holding it as high as possible. Next, we're going to externally rotate the rear leg by raising our knee like shown. This progression is both of these movements. I'll show you here. You start by internally rotating your rear leg and then externally rotating your rear leg. The more you lean away from yourself, the easier it will be. Here are some common mistakes. Remember to drive into the ground with your front knee. Keep it on the ground. When you raise your rear leg, you also want to keep your foot off the ground. Don't just place it on the ground. Take your time with this. Find the progression that is right for you, how far you need to lean back so that you can get in a quality rep. Once you've done one side, swap around and work the other leg. And that's it, guys. Those are what I call hip swivels. Remember, at the start, it's very important to have a bit of a go and experiment and find the regression and progression that is right for you. You want to find a place where it's hard and challenging, but not so hard and challenging you can only do 2 or 3 and no more. Some place where you're not cheating and you're not forcing your way through it, where you can work up to 10 reps per set. If you've never given rotation a focus, then I would recommend making this a focus for about 2 to 4 weeks, and you can go about this in 2 ways. So one way which I like doing is something daily. I will do 1 or 2 sets in the morning just to warm up the hips and give them a feel. Otherwise, you can work them into your normal sessions and then do 3 or 4 sets of up to 10 reps each. So with the daily effort, I would choose a regression that's a bit easier, and if it's going to be something which you incorporate with your other work, then you can choose something maybe which is a bit harder and more intense. Otherwise, how I use this ongoing is before I move into any of my lateral work, let's say forward or backwards, side to side movements, then I will try and work rotation first to warm up the hips and rotate through that joint capsule. Afterwards, I'll move on to that work. And that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed today's explanation and movement, and give it a go. Let me know what you think. See ya.